haven't even started yet. Okay. So I know we're on the design stage, but I want to talk a little bit about product right now. So bear with me for a second. I want to talk about the reason why the way we create products is changing and how that's changing and why it's more difficult than ever to create competitive products in today's business landscape. So this is creating this kind of landscape, this period of uncertainty of how do we navigate this and how do we continue to create competitive digital products. So I want to talk about the factors related to that. One of the factors I see that's contributing the most to this is that consumer expectations are at an all-time high. And when I say this, I want to say that like us as designers, us as product people, I think we've done our job maybe too well, right? In the past, say, decade or so, the quality of products has changed. It has raised significantly, right? To the level where consumers have these raised expectations. It's just much, much higher than before. I mean, people expect everything to be user-centric, to have great usability, accessibility, to have amazing feature sets and performance, right? And that's just the bare minimum. And if you're not meeting that, you're falling behind. But if you are meeting that, you're just making it, right? It's just table stakes right now. And this is setting, the standard much, much higher than it was before. And along with that is technology, right? So technology has been both like empowering and disruptive to business, right? A lot of technology has allowed us to build these competitive moats and build these durable advantages that we use to, build our businesses and create, successful outcomes. But that has been quickly eroded, and that's no longer the reality today. So what I'm saying is that technology is no longer the differentiator. And if you look at maybe the history of the past few years, this past 3 decades, you can see some signals of that, right? Another great example would be, say, global cloud infrastructure. That was something that companies would spend, say, decades and spend millions or billions of dollars to build that out, right? Or taking payments from everywhere around the world, right? That was a hard thing to do before. And now AI, right? That was something that companies spent decades to build, and they wanted to have their own proprietary AI. And now anybody can put that in their product, right? All this can happen with anybody. One person can build a product that can ship globally, take payments from everywhere, and has AI in it in a weekend. That's the reality of what it is today, right? So what this is leading to is that there's a cycle of invention and commoditization, right? This is nothing new, but what is new is that it's getting faster and faster, right? Even that last phase of AI to commoditize AI has been very, very short, right? And this is leading to this cycle where you can no longer depend on technology to be that differentiator. So what got us here, I think, no longer guarantees success, right? When we think about the market today, when we think about how mature many of the markets are, you can't be the first one to market. You can't depend on speed to market when everyone can ship fast and everyone can ship any idea they have very, very quickly. There's a high likelihood that whatever you thought of, whatever you're thinking of, has already been shipped. So how do you stand out? Information, having some secret sauce or something like that. Once someone sees something in the market, it's quickly replicated and it's shared, right? It's commoditized very quickly. And the same with technology, as we discussed, right? So everything that got us here no longer guarantees that we're going to be in this position going forward. So this leads us to this place where I call the product singularity, right? This kind of state of convergence. And I'm seeing this happen in a lot of different places. I'm seeing this happen in technology. For example, when technology is commoditized, we see this kind of convergence of sameness, of execution, right? So now with AI is amazing when it comes to being a feature, right? But because it's so easy to implement now, everyone's doing it. And we're not asking whether or not we should do it. We're just doing it because why not, right? And what happens is that everything is AI enabled, whether it needs to be or not, right? It's this convergence. I mean, it's not just AI alone, but like there are many different features and technologies that are implemented in the same way. And they all converge into having similar products. But design is not immune to this as well, right? So we think about design. I mean, Apple's not the first one to do this kind of glass morphism, but, their recent launch has kind of popularized it, and now everyone's looking at this and replicating it, right? Over the next few months or even weeks, you're going to see tons of apps that have that same type of design style because everyone's replicating it now, and that novelty is being quickly commoditized, right? So how do we navigate this space, right? So I'm going to give you a little bit of an example. If you don't know, I'm based in Japan. I'm based in Japan, the land of the convenience store. Uh, in Japan, we call convenience stores konbinis for short, right? So as an example, I want to talk about convenience stores. Convenience stores are, hence the name, very, very convenient. You can buy whatever you need there. You can buy snacks and fresh food. You can pay your bills. You can pay your taxes. You can buy concert tickets. You can even buy underwear. I mean, I'm not judging. Stuff happens, but like, but the problem is that every single konbini, they're all the same when it comes to features. Like, how do you stand out, right? So if I like Family Mart, and then there's, maybe I like 7-Eleven better than Family Mart, right? And there's a Family Mart 10 meters away, and the 7-Eleven's 100 meters away. Which one am I going to? Even if I like 7-Eleven, I might just go to Family Mart. It's a bit closer, right? And if that 7-Eleven is a kilometer away, I'm definitely going to Family Mart, because what happens is with this sameness, this convergence, that everyone just kind of follows the path of least resistance and goes to that place because there really isn't any significant difference between these things, right? And this is causing this, say, convergence, right? All this commoditization of technology and features and aesthetics and things like that are creating this convergence of execution because everyone can do it. The barriers are so low. Everyone does everything and does everything kind of the same way. And it creates this singularity of sameness where everything kind of starts converging in the same place. So how do we break away from this singularity of sameness? How do we stand out in the current business landscape? All right. So I want to talk about design. Maybe not in the way that you think I want to talk about. I want to talk about designing the vibes and how that's contributing to standing out in the current market. I first want to say that I think the next phase of design is going to be less about designing screens and more about designing the vibes. So let's talk about what those vibes are. When I think about products today that are incredibly, say, not just well-known, but successful in business, I think of products like this. I think of products like Figma. Sorry to be biased, but think of products like Notion or Versal or Linear or Craft and things like that. And these products, of course, they have great execution, right? They're hitting the baseline standards for usability, scalable design, user centricity, accessibility, and have great technology behind them, right? But what makes them stand out is not what you think. What makes them stand out is something special. And I call that love. I think what makes them stand out is this intense affection for the product, right? Maybe not just the product, but the brand itself. And that's what's incredibly special, but it's incredibly powerful. So what is this love? Well, I think right now, we're in this era of making products that people love. That's what's standing out. That's what's transcending that logic, right? Love is irrational. It's irrational passion that pushes people to do things beyond looking at specs and features, and they decide things based on feelings and emotion. Love is, right now, I think, what sets the most competitive products apart. So when it comes to design, I think it's no longer how it looks or how it works. It's also how it makes people feel. So let's talk about what that love is, right? So to me, I think love is it's like going the distance. So I know we're in Melbourne, we have a great cafe culture here. So maybe you can probably resonate with this. But for me, I think when I think of going the distance, I think of hey, there's two cafes, and there's that one cafe that you really just love. You really vibe with that, right? There's something about it. Every cafe is selling coffee. They have the same baseline functionality, but for some reason you want to go to that one cafe that you really like, even though it's all the way across town. It's farther away. It's actually more expensive. It's inconvenient. But you'll still go to that place to have your coffee because you love it, right? So this is irrational. It transcends logic, right? It's a very powerful thing when it comes to building this loyalty to your product, right? For me, I love sports cars. By the way, love is like buying a sports car. So this is a very interesting example. This is actually the same car here, the newer generation and the later generation. And these cars are actually on the used market about the same price because people love the older version, right? This car is in many ways inferior. This car, on a performance standpoint, it's, you know, the newer version is superior in every single way. But people will still say, I want this one. I want the old one because I love the way it makes me feel. That love, that vibe, right? That's not rational, but people will still decide that, right? And that's a powerful thing that you can use in business because what this does is it turns those users into fans and champions, right? When we think about fans and champions of your product, this is not just something that's qualitative, it's very quantitative, right? The people who are fans and champions of your product, those are the people who are actually marketing and selling the product for you, right? Getting into spaces that you could never get into, that you couldn't get into with an ad, nor a webinar or something like that, or getting into those spaces and championing your product in a way that's more authentic than you could ever do. That's the power of love. And this is something that goes from qualitative down to quantitative, and we need to embrace that. So it's when your product becomes a story and your story becomes a product. It's one thing, and people are in love with that, right? And bringing it all back, I think design is how we create that love. So if you told me 10 years ago today that people would be getting tattoos of logos of enterprise SaaS software, I probably wouldn't believe you. Would you believe me? But here we are, right? So this is kind of an extreme example of love, but this is, illustrates that love is a powerful emotion, and building products that people love can actually be a viable business strategy, right? And design is how we get there. So design is the differentiator in the current business landscape of creating competitive products. So let's talk about how we do that. I think that starts with democratizing design. So before I go into democratizing design, I want to talk about the scope of design and the objective design. So when we think about the scope of design, in this case specifically product design, thinking about creating, designers creating digital products, it's actually very, very narrow, right? But when you think about like what actually affects design, what influences design, there's so many things that are upstream and so many things that are downstream that could influence design. And these things all could influence your, customer experience, right? But as designers, we often spend a lot of time in this one narrow sliver, right? And if we think about the objective design, I think the objective of a great design should be not to create designs, it should be to create outcomes, right? To influence the way people think and behave to desirable outcomes. That should be what we should be trying for design. And if we think about it that way, why are we just focused on this narrow scope here? Why don't we think about all the other parts that we could design that could influence that, right? How do we go beyond designing the screen and design the business? Because from my experience, great work blurs the lines between roles, right? It's not just limited to a department. It goes across those many different services, and that's how you build that product love, right? And then the teams that are using design the most successfully today and building those products people love, what I see is that they use design for everything, and everyone is a part of that, right? And that's what sets them apart. So the best teams at design are designing together. And how are they doing that, right? So a lot of the things they're doing is they're blurring the lines between roles, right? They're doing things like taking designers out of silos. They're creating teams that are based on objectives, right? Not just deliverables, and putting people together in more cross-functional ways, having designers mixed in with other people and building together, right? And when they build products together, they're not just building them, they're designing them together and involving other people in the design process. This is an example from Spotify here. Well, they did a field trip to Indonesia, and they had a team of cross-functional partners, including a designer, doing user research together, right? And having those diverse perspectives together and involving people in the design process and having them understand that, right? And this is a great quote as well, I think. This is from Patagonia, right? And for most people, he would think like, hey, like a writer and like a, river ecologist and a designer, this doesn't make sense. But for Patagonia's business, it does make sense. If they're around objectives, why don't we have all the people related to that, the stakeholders related to that, design together, right? And this is how they're changing design. And then other teams are taking design beyond products, right? And this is a great example from Stripe of designing the business, right? All that experience you use to design products and design experience for customers, you can flip it and you can design the organization itself. How do you design a better experience for the people working on the products? If they have a better experience, that trickles down into building better products, right? So Stripe is using design to design the experience for their annual planning, right? And make that a better thing, right? And this all comes down into democratizing design, opening it up for everyone, right? And making design something that's more than just a role, making it a culture, a process, right? A medium. And I think design just needs to be something that everyone owns and understands. It needs to be not just a role, it needs to be like a literacy, right, within the organization. And having that literacy of design understanding and being able to look through the lens of design is very powerful. And this is how a lot of these teams today are creating design and experiences that people love at scale. Because let's face it, even though we're designers, we don't have time to design everything. So where does this leave designers, right? I want to talk about where designers are in this kind of state of design democratization. So when we democratize design and everyone's designing, what happens to us? Well, I think we're shifting to this phase where I call orchestration. Until now, we are operators and operators of tools, and we spend a lot of time just trying to master a tool to be able to output our intent, right, and express our desires and what we want to build, right? But now, thanks to technology, these tools are reducing the barriers for execution. It gets easier and faster to execute, right? So we can spend more time thinking and less time trying to master a tool, trying to master a single domain just to express an idea, right? And we can spend more time thinking about how do we influence the way people think and behave to get to outcomes, right? I think that's where we should be focused on, right? And we could open up the scope to something that's much, much bigger, much, much broader and wider, right? And we can use all that surface area, all those touch points to create a more holistic experience. Even in the product scope, it can go deeper, right? Looking at all of these different kind of sections here, this is essentially right now probably a role for every single person, a visual designer, a motion designer, right? Someone on UI, UX and product and things like that. But the challenge is that these are all different roles and you spend all this time trying to master one domain just to execute, it gets fragmented. We can't have a cohesive experience from end to end, right? When you have all the tools that allow you to easily execute these things, instead of playing one instrument in the band, you can orchestrate all of them and you can create a different melody, right? And that's where we're nearing right now, quickly for design. So what this is bringing us to is it's bringing us to the shift, right? From micro to macro. Of course, on craft, there's always going to be a need to kind of zoom in and craft those micro details and polish those things. But we now have the option to zoom out, right? To look at everything and connect the dots from each different piece together. And that's a powerful thing. And I think that's an exciting place to be. Now, I think the next phase for designers is going to be much more strategic. It's going to be about influencing people in the way they behave, but also educating your team, educating them about design and how to use design and empowering them as well, so that you're designing not as a designer or a design organization, but as a whole organization as well. So let's wrap this up and talk about how you create your unfair advantage. So I've broken it down to 3 easy steps, which is maybe not so easy, but hopefully this kind of summarizes it for you. The first one is to expand the scope. Expand the scope of design, right? Right now, it's very siloed, very narrow. Think about how you can spread that out. Thinking about how you can use design in different places, how you could create experiences and craft things that are going to design your organization or design a different experience across these different surface areas. And the second one is to democratize it and open it up and allow other people to be involved in the design process, because people have different backgrounds and inputs that they can, create, amazing ideas that maybe you can come up with, right? And for designers, if we're the only ones who can design because we have the skill, there's a very much of a bias there, right? So democratizing this gives us a lot of, space for innovation there. And the last one is optimize for love. Especially around digital products, we spend a lot of time looking at dashboards and quantifiable metrics, right? But the reality is, you still need to think about the qualitative. Having that emotion, having that love, it does eventually trickle down into business outcomes, right? So it's something that you need to do and optimize for in parallel. So if you've got this far and you're thinking like, I want to democratize design in my organization, you're in luck. I have a course to sell to you. No, it's free. But so I wrote a whole report on the insights, the data behind this, and the practical side with examples of how to democratize design at scale and build design-driven culture. So please check it out if you're interested in this. And now I just want to bring it back one more time to the feels, right? Just to close it out, right? So I know that that more design in more places leads to better outcomes, right? So let's design products that people love. Let's use design as a differentiator, and let's design the vibes. Thank you.